President Trump now urging Americans not to gather in groups larger than 10, to stay out of restaurants, schooling from home. And the president's own warning late today that this country could be dealing with coronavirus until July or August. Tonight, schools now shut down in at least 35 states. The major lockdown declared in the San Francisco area. Nearly 7 million people in California ordered to shelter in place at home for weeks. In New York City tonight, the major new steps. Empty shelves across the country, grocery store lines winding through parking lots. And the major chain tonight announcing specific hours for shoppers 60 and older. The stock market free fall, emergency triggers kicking in yet again to halt trading today, even after dramatic action taken by the Fed to lower interest rates. The Dow closing down nearly 3,000 points, and we're live. Are American hospitals ready for this? After Dr. Anthony Fauci acknowledged the testing in these first weeks of the crisis was a, quote, failing. Tonight, medical professionals on the front lines who are supposed to process the tests, what they're now saying. And supplies in this country, the president telling governors today not to wait, to find ventilators on their own. As we learn of at least 2 ER doctors from New Jersey to Washington State have now tested positive. Just in tonight from France, the French president saying we are at war. In Italy, at least 349 deaths in the last 24 hours alone. And a bishop who recently met with the Pope now testing positive. And tonight, the actor Idris Elba and his video message announcing he tested positive, his words. And in this country, the NBA player Donovan Mitchell, who has coronavirus, and his eye-opening message.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us to start another week together. It's been a remarkable thing that we have all witnessed together in this country just over the weekend, just today, in fact, a reset of American life. Trying to get groceries with empty shelves, trying to find children childcare. How will parents manage these weeks ahead without school? Not to mention the ongoing struggle for those who fear they have coronavirus. Where and how do they get tested, even amid promises that the testing will now be more readily available? Are the hospitals ready? We're going to get to all of it tonight. And this evening, more than 4,200 cases that we know of, at least 82 deaths. Late today, we all watched as President Trump issued new nationwide guidelines for Americans across this country, acknowledging the outbreak, that this virus is not under control, saying it may take until July or August for it to, in his words, wash through the country, telling Americans to avoid groups larger than 10, do not go to restaurants and bars. At least 35 states closing schools for nearly 36 million students. New York City among the latest, sending more than 1 million students home. Governors and mayors shutting down restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, and late today, drastic steps in several hotspots. Among them in California, 7 Bay Area counties, that includes San Francisco, ordering nearly 7 million people to shelter in place at home for at least 3 weeks. We have all been to the grocery store. We've seen the shelves, empty shelves, in fact, and this line wrapping around a Costco in the Los Angeles area just before dawn this morning. And in so many stores across this country, it's been stripped clean. The Hy-Vee supermarket, this is Omaha, Nebraska. And at airports over the weekend, we all witnessed this. Americans returning home from overseas, they ended up standing in lines so crowded, so close to one another, some for hours at medical checkpoints. Tonight, here, the stock market, the emergency trigger kicking in yet again today to halt the market shortly after it opened, even after the Fed took extraordinary action. And tonight, right here, the video messages from those with coronavirus, including a famous actor and an NBA player. Their descriptions were eye-opening today. ABC's Whit Johnson leads us off right here in New York City tonight.
Tonight, with daily life grinding to a halt across America, the White House announcing drastic steps, part of a 15-day plan to slow the spread.
We'd much rather be ahead of the curve than behind it.
President Trump's coronavirus task force now urging people to avoid gatherings of 10 or more people, discretionary travel, encouraging older people and those with underlying conditions to stay home. The administration also telling people not to visit nursing homes and recommending bars and restaurants close in states with community spread.
If everyone makes this change or these critical changes and sacrifices now, we will rally together as one nation and we will defeat the virus.
Okay, you're not saying it's under control, right?
I'm not referring to it, meaning if you're talking about the virus, no, that's not under control for any place in the world.
The president now warning the crisis could stretch deep into the summer.
People are talking about July, August, something like that. So it could be right in that period of time where I say it washes through. Other people don't like that term, but where it washes through.
But today, a major step toward a possible vaccine.
The trial is taking place in Seattle. There will be 2 injections, one at 0 day, first one, then 28 days. There will be 3 separate doses.
Volunteer Jennifer Haller getting the first injection in Seattle as part of that clinical trial.
Everybody's feeling so helpless right now, and I realized that there was something that I could do to help.
The vaccine's still not expected to be available to the public for at least a year. Tonight, with the cases across the country climbing, more than a dozen states already closing bars and restaurants except for takeout and delivery, including New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, who will also shut down gyms, movie theaters, and casinos starting tonight.
This is a national problem. It cannot be done in a piecemeal method.
In the San Francisco Bay Area, a sweeping shelter-in-place order for nearly 7 million people. Residents told to only leave their homes for food, medicine, and exercise. California's governor is urging home isolation for all adults over the age of 65.
Most important thing, again, is to protect the most vulnerable.
Nationwide, at least 35 states closing public schools, forcing more than 35 million kids to stay home.
Creates a lot of hardship for people, but it's the right choice.
In Boston, volunteers boxing up homework to deliver to students at home. And with so many American children without access to school meals, communities from Pennsylvania to Texas stepping up to make sure families have the supplies they need.
Trying to stay positive in a bad situation, so that's it.
Long lines at Costco's from Illinois to Los Angeles.
And thousands of people are rushing to trying to get into the Costco here in the
lines snaking around the building before dawn. Stores across the country running out of basic items like toilet paper and water. The Stop and Shop grocery chain announcing new early shopping hours for customers 60 and over. At U.S. airports, chaos as Americans rush home after travel bans on European countries. Passengers waiting hours, shoulder to shoulder, for medical screenings.
I definitely felt unsafe. If the government's telling me to stay in groups of less than 50 and keep social distancing, that was the opposite.
But departures areas around the country eerily empty.
But look at this. There's just nobody here at the airport.
And Whit Johnson back with us to lead us off again tonight. And with the president and these new guidelines late today, Dr. Fauci then said that this is guidance for the next 15 days in this country, that the White House and the president's team would then reassess. And the president was also asked today if he was considering a nationwide lockdown, a nationwide quarantine.
And David, today President Trump made clear at this point they are not looking at a nationwide quarantine, but he did say that they are evaluating so-called hotspots. Those are hard-hit areas across the country to see if any additional restrictions could be required. David.
All right, Whit Johnson tonight. Whit, thank you. The health toll in this country and the economic one, despite major new action by the Fed on Sunday, a very rare move. This morning, the market drop was steep. Trading halted just 30 seconds in. The Dow closing down nearly 3,000 points, 13%, the worst day since the Black Monday market crash in 1987. So again tonight, ABC's chief business and economics correspondent Rebecca Jarvis live downtown tonight. And Rebecca, this was alarming, especially given the Fed's very rare move on a Sunday, and yet the market still dropped and quickly this morning.
Cutting interest rates, David, to 0%, but it wasn't enough. Look, just as the country is trying to wrap its head around this new reality, so too is Wall Street trying to contend with the new math of the current day. Grinding the country to a screeching halt comes with a giant price tag, by some estimates as much as $120 billion this month alone. And we've already heard it, that uncertainty from America's 30 million small businesses. And just today, the U.S. airline industry, which employs 750,000 Americans, saying that without a $50 billion bailout, David, they are likely to run out of money by the end of this year. David?
All right, so much to watch on the markets as well. And Rebecca, you'll continue to do that for us. Thank you. There has been so many promises heard around this country about the number of tests that would be available in this country. First, we heard there would be 1 million tests for coronavirus, then a promise of 4 million. So tonight, where does that stand? A reality check. And at least 2 emergency room doctors we learned of tonight on the front lines of the outbreak from New Jersey to Washington State now testing positive. More drive-through testing sites are popping up like this one in San Antonio, but medical professionals tonight we're hearing from say they lack the protective equipment like what you see in Denver there, that they say they need to have to stay safe. And the threat to so many on the front lines, the healthcare workers, the first responders, because many who have the virus have no symptoms, as we've learned. Here's our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, tonight.
Tonight, America's hospitals and healthcare workers under siege. Emergency room doctor James Pruden testing positive for coronavirus. The 7-year-old is now in isolation in Paterson, New Jersey. And tonight, at the Life Care Center in King County, Washington, 46 employees testing positive. In another nursing home in the same town where 15 people have died, a doctor in his 40s is infected. Over 43 people have died in King County alone. And multiple workers at Boston's Brigham and Women's have now tested positive for COVID-19. Hospitals around the country now reporting both a spike in incoming patients and a shortage of critical protective equipment, also crucial to protecting themselves. Hospitals scrambling to prepare for the onslaught, setting up tents outside emergency rooms. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo calling on President Trump to mobilize the military to build more hospitals.
You overwhelm the hospitals. You have people on gurneys in hallways. That is what is going to happen now if we do nothing.
Another critical matter, testing. People lining up in cars for drive-thrus. Vice President Pence repeatedly saying more tests will be available.
By the weekend, another 1 million tests will be shipped around the country.
But it's not as simple as just sending out the tests. The healthcare workers need to be in full protective gear. A number of states now saying they're concerned about a shortage of protective gear to keep clinicians safe.
This is something we are very concerned about.
Testing numbers are also lagging. New York has conducted roughly 7,000 since the outbreak. Public labs in North Carolina, however, have only done about 300. And in South Korea, where the number of cases have flattened, 275,000 tests have been conducted. They're now even creating phone booth-type sites. Donovan Mitchell is an NBA player with the Utah Jazz. He's in isolation after becoming infected, and his case highlighting the need for more testing.
You know, I don't have any symptoms. That's the scariest part about this virus is that, you know, you may seem fine, be fine, and you never know who you may be talking to, who they're going home to.
Even those who do get tested are having problems. Amanda Fulma-Chan says her husband Titu's first test got lost, and they then had to complain to their governor before getting a second test, which was positive.
We still don't have the original test results that were sent out from Thursday, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me. These tests have got to be prioritized based on severity and acuity of these cases. Something is very, very wrong. I understand that everyone's learning as they go with this, but people that are in critical condition need those test results, you know, quickly. They don't have time to wait.
He's now in a Virginia ICU in critical condition.
We need to get those tests and the results back quicker than what we're seeing so far in this country. Matt Gutman live from Cedars-Sinai Hospital tonight. And Matt, we can see those triage tents that you told us about right behind you tonight for testing patients, but you're hearing that there's now confusion with all these private labs involved in the process. So many had new hope that they were being brought in, and certainly that's a good sign, but then obvious kinks ahead here.
That's right. Labs are saying that people are calling in thinking that they can get tested at the labs. They cannot. The labs are there specifically just to run the results and get the results for a particular swab. The swabs are taken by medical professionals at clinics and hospitals, emergency rooms like the ones behind me. And not everyone, David, can get tested right now. It's really just healthcare workers, first responders, and the people who are most vulnerable and come in with acute symptoms. David.
All right, Matt Gutman, our thanks to you again this evening. Overseas tonight, the new epicenter of the global outbreak. This evening, French President Emmanuel Macron declaring we are at war, and the alarming news headline tonight about the age of some of the patients in that country. He called on the French people to limit contact with others, a state of emergency in Spain tonight. Police seizing 150,000 surgical masks from a factory to take the masks to the health workers. And tonight in Italy, at least 349 deaths in just the past 24 hours. And a bishop who recently met with the Pope has now tested positive. ABC's Maggie Rulli reporting from London tonight.
Tonight, France's president declaring Europe is at war with coronavirus.
Nous sommes en guerre.
France joining Britain with sweeping restrictions as cases spike across the continent.
Now is the time for everyone to stop non-essential contact with others and to stop all unnecessary travel.
The UK taking wartime measures, asking companies like Ford and Rolls-Royce to help manufacture vital equipment like ventilators. British actor Idris Elba posting about his coronavirus test today.
It came back positive. Yeah, and it sucks. This is serious, you know? Now's the time to really think about social distancing, washing your hands.
He says he feels okay and is in self-isolation with his wife, who hasn't yet been tested. In Italy's north, hearses overwhelming this cemetery. Despite the national lockdown, almost 350 deaths in the last 24 hours. The death toll today passing 2,000. A French bishop who met with Pope Francis last week at the Vatican now testing positive for the virus.
You must stay safely at your accommodation.
And the Spanish government declaring a state of emergency for 47 million people, even confiscating 150,000 surgical masks from one factory to help overstretched hospitals. The European Commission now seeking a ban on non-essential travel throughout the continent.
The less travel, the more we can contain the virus.
And the World Health Organization warning countries still aren't testing enough.
We have a simple message for all countries: test, test, test.
But a glimmer of hope in China, which has lifted some health restrictions in the hardest hit province, allowing thousands of workers to go back to factories.
The image from China tonight, Maggie from London. And Maggie, over the weekend, I took note that authorities in France said that half of the 300 coronavirus patients in critical condition were under the age of 60, half under 60. And that was alarming because it was somewhat different from what we've heard so far.
Yeah, that's right, David. Now, while statistics show that people of an advanced age are still more likely to fall critical ill, what we're seeing here in Europe and there in the U.S. is that younger people in their 40s and 50s are now also falling critically ill. And David, that development has experts very worried. David.
Maggie Rulli reporting in again tonight. Thank you, Maggie. President Trump acknowledging late today the virus is not under control and sharing his own personal experience, what his young son asked him. As many Americans fear that what they're seeing in Europe is about to play out here. Here's ABC senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega tonight.
Despite widespread delays over testing and repeated mixed messages from his own administration, today President Trump gave himself high marks.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job.
Does the buck stop with you?
Yeah, normally, but I think when you hear this has never been done before in this country.
But the confusing messages from the administration continued. The New York Times reporting that President Trump stunned some of the nation's governors in a conference call, telling them they should not wait for